Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and this is Anatomy of a Fall. This is the most recent Palme d'Or winner and a Best Picture nominee, various Oscar nominee. I think when you think of a procedural crime thing, that's usually what you mean for a procedural. You think of kind of the idea of going through a crime from beginning to end. Often crime drama is very moralistic, particularly procedurals. When you think of everything from TV with Law and Order, all those Chicago-y shows or whatever, things like that from like Hitchcock didn't really make procedurals. They say it's a Hitchcock thing. I don't necessarily see that, but he is a guy that did crime things, so I guess that too with this one. I think with this is it takes on the idea of a procedural, your moralistic ideas of it, and kind of puts you through someone who's going through this without fully understanding whether there is guilt or not, but almost seeing how that procedure, the ultimate, like, what is the end goal of going through all this and what was the point of it. It's almost like existential in its kind of critique of the idea of infrastructure and what it needs to do and what it is ultimately teaching us. And I think when you get to the end of the film, you kind of wonder, what was the point of doing all that, and was that just so everyone can communicate the idea that something could have gone wrong, not necessarily helping something that did go wrong. Anatomy of a Fall is basically about a man who in the Chernobyl town in the French Alps falls off of his house, off of like the third floor kind of, and his son, who's blind, finds him, and his wife calls the ambulance. And their investigation starts where they feel that he didn't fall or jump, that he was pushed or he was killed and made to look like a fall and all these things. And the film is basically investigation into whether she did or didn't, or whether there was a crime or isn't there. I'm not going to spoil it necessarily, although I don't know if you can spoil this one, really. But one thing I think this film, and I think the best thing this film does, is if you're, I think it's like NBC Dateline or NBC Dateline Mystery or something. I used to watch that a lot, and oftentimes if you get a really long one, wherever you started with the crime thing, when you ended, it's like everyone's lives are sort of destroyed. There's usually like a character who like comes in the end, and you're like, what the fuck is this? But the point of what I'm really saying is that, like, the idea of going from one point to the other, sometimes they don't find the killer or find out what happened, but in the end, like, everyone's lives were destroyed by like going through this whole thing. And you kind of do question, like, well, what is the point if this was the end result? And I think a lot about that while watching this film. I think about that a lot of things. Like, there's a really beauty in infrastructure and everything we do with what we can do with, like, having the trains run on time and the buses and, Mussolini fascism and shit. But no, there is an actual beauty in that. But the idea that there's oftentimes where it's like it runs and the gears are turning, but where are we in the end of it? Like, what was the purpose of it? Did that help us? Did that help this family? Did it avenge this person? Did it get a killer off the streets or something? And while watching this and thinking of procedurals and how often I think people find a catharsis in hearing a murder mystery, and you're either scared or you feel like, oh, and that person was caught and that's the crime and I have solved this thing and I've done this right thing. But like, I often feel like when you're going through those, I don't know if like this is all right, like to have, the jerky lawyer in this, and like the lawyer who's your friend, and going through all this and everyone spending all their time on this. Is that a worthwhile to the human experience? Did we really learn anything about them? And I do think, like, this is about a married couple who had a lot of problems. I often feel like I know quite a bit about them, but I also knew like fucking nothing. You hear the couple fight in a recording and stuff. They had arguments and stuff. The opening before the fall happens, he's playing a Steel Drums cover of PIMP, which I swear I've heard, not that version, but that a bunch of times, like in Brooklyn and stuff. I mean, in the original there's sort of a steel drum thing, and I believe that's in the music video. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's so funny. I'm like, I think that's like kind of a steel drum standard, but whatever. I would love to find that song on Spotify. I haven't looked, but PMP is like not my favorite 50 Cent single. I don't know. It's like, of Get Rich or Die Trying, I'd probably put it pretty low, but whatever. In case you were wondering. But you do feel like you understand, but you also don't. Sandra Huller gives an interesting performance because she's speaking in English, she's speaking in French, which she doesn't understand. There's like this weird language barrier, which was by design, so you don't feel like you really know her. She didn't actually know if she was guilty or not. I personally either don't think she did or think it was an accident or something, but I'm also like, I like the interpretation of a film that like wants to play with you, wants to leave it open-ended. I do think that says a lot about storytelling and so forth. And I like the guy who played her lawyer, Swan Arnold. I don't know, his text will be down here, I'm sorry, sir. He was actually very captivating and good, and the jerky lawyer guy on the other side. And I don't know the French legal system. I'm assuming in this movie that's how it works normally, and it's not like being silly or something. I don't know, because I don't know anything about that, but it's like she was just there the whole time and would interject and stuff. It was interesting. I was like, wow, the French legal system is weird, dude. I don't know. I guess this is how they do it. I don't know. Sometimes when I see a court drama in a foreign film, I'm like, I guess that's the law there. I hope I'm not misunderstanding. I don't know. People really, really like this movie. I don't know if I think it is a very good movie. I'm not going to, this isn't like a hot take thing or something. But I often think, when I was watching it, I was thinking like, could not a Law and Order or a short film or a shorter movie have said the same things more effectively and distinctly? Now I get like the point of the length of this, because it's about 2.5 hours, is that this goes on for so long, and what is the point? And that is ultimately like what this film is trying to say, and to really explore these things, but like ultimately give you like, leave you thinking about this whole situation. And like I understand when films use flow to their point and stuff, and that's interesting. I just at the end was like, I think it is a good movie. I think it's really smart in terms of what it's doing, and it has a lot of faith in the audience, which we don't see. It feels weird when you see a movie that has like faith in the audience. You're like, whoa, where do you come from? I think I'm smart or something. This is crazy. But I did kind of, I don't know. I was like, this could have been tackled so many different ways, and I don't necessarily find it like entirely unique. I think like, it's a thought-provoking procedural, and we've had like a couple procedural or directors going through kind of like a genre or something, like The Killer from Fincher or things like that, where they're going through a specific genre and like going through it and being the kind of journeyman genre person. I think Justin Triet does that as well, and does that excellently actually. But I think when you go into these genres, like ultimately what are you saying? And I feel like a lot of other people, I mean, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang said the same fucking thing. And it's like, and I get like films aren't about what they're about, they're how they are about it. And I liked how it was about it, but I don't necessarily think that how it is about it is ultimately overly that unique to it. It's like, okay, this is another one, it's very good at it, but I don't necessarily understand why this is standing out so much. I do think it was really good. I don't know. I feel like there's always these Oscar movies that come out and people really like them, are very passionate at the time, but then like I'm sort of mystified by like the ultimate like overarching attention towards it. I don't think it's very much like Hitchcock. I think Hitchcock made a much more exciting movie. This is very like kind of slow and far, not too slow. I mean, I think you could actually, I think someone who's more into more Hollywood films could watch this. Ultimately I think it's interesting what it can say about you, how you feel about her. And apparently this was based on the Amanda Knox trial, probably the best movie based on the ideas of the Amanda Knox trial, because there's been a few. And I do think that is an interesting idea of like, does it even matter if they did it at a certain point? We're just going to go through this and have everyone do their whole theories, and like, it almost gets into the idea of universal truth. And when there isn't one, and there's just this constant search, like, is the search overpowering the reason to find that truth in the first place? And that kind of like is really what stuck with me through watching this, is I kind of felt that what is the point of all of this. If we're just like sitting in the, I don't know, it very much is this existential idea throughout this entire film, and it sort of bugs me where like the lawyer, where she's like, I didn't kill him, and her lawyer's like that's not the point, but I'm like, but that is the fucking point. That is why. I'm sorry, what? Like that's the thing that like bugs me about all these things and makes me like extra depressed at like, what have we created as humanity when we're looking at these things and you're like, but what if it doesn't matter, then what is everyone doing? And everyone's like, oh, there's procedure, there's precedent, there's morality. But then you're like, but if we're doing all these things, and in the end, I feel like I am spoiling this, so maybe, I don't know, we're not going to figure this out, then what the fuck is going on, man? Like, this is like the whole time I was thinking, like, what are we even doing? Like, what are we accomplishing? And I don't know if anyone did much of anything. I don't know if... I do think when you get to the whole Amanda Knox trial and all those trials, it's like we threw these people... We like messed with these people so much, but what did we learn from this? Like, what did we accomplish? And nobody sits there and goes, like, has an answer. Like, it just feels like we're going through the motions. We all get chewed up and then it gets spit out. And we're like, what the fuck was that ultimately? And like, I feel like this film captured that very well. Maybe talking about this film, honestly, making this video made me like it a little more. But while I was watching it, did feel like, I don't know, I think it's good. It just didn't like blow me away or anything. I was just like, I do think it's very thought-provoking. I do think Justine Triet did a very good job like directing it and figuring this out. And this is very much like an interested film medium kind of thing where like you're messing with the ideas and you're messing with the audience, but also having a lot of faith in them. It's a really interesting movie. I think there's some movies that don't tell you an answer because the filmmaker doesn't know, and I think with Anatomy of a Fall, the filmmaker, it doesn't matter if you know, and that's a very interesting, different kind of thing. I think this is a very good movie. I would recommend it to people. I just don't understand the overarching acclaim necessarily, but I also was like brought on to say things while I was reading it that I didn't think I was. I think as a conversation piece, it works very well. There's probably an uncomfortable conversation that you might have with someone you love while watching this. Not for me actually, but like it could happen to you. Maybe, I don't know. I think when you go through this whole film and you look at what happens to her, Sandra Huller, and you don't understand what she's doing, and in a weird, odd performance that I'm very surprised got an Oscar nomination, to be honest with you. It's not the sort of performance they usually award, so I was surprised in a good way, though. When you go through this, when you see her being brought back, and we're going through these things, understanding their marriage, understanding all these things, all the tragedies they've been through, and everything he's put her through, everything she's put him through, blah, blah, blah. I think ultimately you question why have all these things for this case, and what were we saying with it? And I think ultimately, like, you know, bizarre Kafka-esque paperwork in like Brazil or something, and I do think the film saying this isn't just my own existential dread or something, is the idea that, well, it isn't the point. This is what's going on now. But like, this is what's going on there. Why is it going on? And the why should be the point, but there is no point. We're just stuck in this bullshit. And you're just sitting there like, why have we brought ourselves here in the first place? And what are we really learning from it? And what does us as people, what does it say about us as people that we want these things to happen to people? What is our ultimate goal? And I think when you look at any case like this and you walk away from it and you feel depressed, you kind of just want to walk away and ignore it, but you can't ignore the fact that we're all kind of just like trapped in this idea that there is no real purpose for doing these things. It's just the purpose of precedent and moralism that, executed in this way, doesn't have a point more than existing for the sake of itself. So if you've seen Anatomy of a Fall and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.